Good evening, Ambassador.
Good evening, and welcome to Brit Talks 2019.
This is our last interview together in your capacity as the British ambassador in Kosovo. Do you have any unfinished work?
I think what we've tried to do in the last 4 years is to encourage Kosovo on the path of taking full responsibility for what happens here. And you can see that people are rising to that challenge, but it's an incomplete process. And the moment when everyone in Kosovo feels that they are able but responsible for the changes, that's when Kosovo will really start to move forwards.
How free is media freedom?
I mean, that's a challenge around the world, in Kosovo as it is elsewhere. Kosovo, I think, is ranked in the middle, around the 70s, in the Media Freedom Index, which is okay, but it could be better. And we've seen unfortunate incidents in the last year of senior politicians slandering and attacking Kosovo media in the Kosovo Serb community. We've seen attacks on Kosovo Albanian journalists. So our situation is clearly better than large parts of the world. We can't be complacent, and it's vital that journalists are given full protection.
Is it at least a bit encouraging that there wasn't any killings of journalists in Kosovo, while the 2019 index marks 11 in the world?
I mean, it's a terrible number. One is too many. And it's encouraging, but we shouldn't be talking in those terms. It should be an exception. 2018 was the most dangerous year for journalists around the world, and we have to stop that if we want to protect our open democratic societies.
Is the label fake news, when it is given to the earth-shattering news anywhere, the new method of censorship and persecution of journalists?
I think a free press is vitally important for active citizens, and sometimes the powerful don't like that. Fake news is a problem, and we've seen that. There's a creation of propagandistic news stories, but when criticism is labelled as fake news, we should really question that. We need citizens to be critical and to think, is this true or is it not? Why does this person want me to believe what they want me to believe?
What do you consider as the main threat of journalists in Kosovo?
I think everything goes back to the rule of law. When there were attacks on Kosovo Albanian journalists, the police investigated, but perpetrators have not been brought to justice. When the rule of law exists for everyone, that will be a very positive step for Kosovo, but until that day, there are going to remain risks.
So is this the same time the answer? What can be done more for the prosecution of those who attack journalists?
Yeah, more energy, more resources and political will to make sure that those responsible are held to account.
Next month, there will be a major media freedom conference in London. What are you willing to pledge?
My pledge is that as a citizen, I will do everything I can to uphold the idea of freedom of speech and protection for those people who exercise it.
A strong media has sometimes to challenge the government and the politicians and basically all officials anywhere. Are you comfortable usually answering the most difficult questions?
I prefer the most difficult questions. Shall we start?
Yes, I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Before we begin, I'd just like to let you know that there are no fire alarm drills planned. So if the fire alarm does go off, then it's a real emergency, and you should try to leave through the exits, which are here at the side and at the back, as calmly and quickly as possible. The toilets, should you need them, at the back, out through the door behind you. And I think that's it. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Her Majesty's Ambassador, His Excellency Rory O'Connell, to introduce tonight's event, and he will be your moderator for the evening. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Brit Talks 2019. It's my favourite event of the year, always, because I get to speak English, and for me that should be easier than speaking anything else, although you will be the judge of that in a few minutes' time. This year, the theme of our Brit Talks is to defend media freedom as part of a global UK campaign. 2018 was the most dangerous year for journalists around the world to date. 99 were killed, 348 were imprisoned, 60 held hostage. This is a terrible and terrifying trend. Our open, democratic societies need journalists, often at personal risk to themselves, to hold the powerful to account and to provide that information that we as active citizens use to keep our societies open, free, and fair. It's clear that in many places the powerful do not want to be held to account. And the easiest and most terrible way to do that is to silence, sometimes forever, those voices speaking out against them. But those voices are deeply important. They are the lifeblood of a democratic society. The British Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, together with his Canadian counterpart, Chrystia Freeland, are holding in July a global conference on media freedom. It is vital that those people who are committed to media freedom not only continue to hold those values, but to stand up and be counted. Those in power to pledge to do what they can to protect journalists, to protect a free and independent media. And those of us as citizens to stand up and look at our own behavior, to commit to doing nothing to create a bad atmosphere, to blame journalists, to blame the media for news that we find uncomfortable or inconvenient. For me and my family, this is a deeply personal issue, because we know what it's like when journalists are attacked and killed for speaking out and trying to report the truth. The men and women who report from the most difficult areas around the world are doing so that we might know without having to find out for ourselves. Kosovo sits in the middle of the world against media freedom. In the 70s, I'm not going to remember the exact number, which is neither good nor bad. There are no red lights or sirens flashing here. When I think back to the last 12 we should be happy that Kosovo hasn't added to the list of 11 journalists killed so far around the world this year. That's a pretty small thing to be happy about. The environmental journalists are labelled as traitors, peddlers of fake news, attacked for doing their work, quickly descend into an environment that cannot sustain democracy. So this campaign, which is part of the global effort, is a vital and important step in protecting, I won't even say building, but protecting what has been created in the past 20 years. We are delighted to have with us today two incredibly interesting speakers. I have abused my position as British ambassador. I try not to. But I decided I want to get people who I find personally interesting. If you don't, I think that would be a bad reflection on your character, because these are two of the most interesting writers, visionary analysts, and fascinating speakers that I could have thought to invite here today. And I hope you'll agree too. We have, as is our practice, invited someone from Kosovo and someone from Britain, because we want the Brit Talks to be about a genuine exchange between our two great societies. No one has the answer to any of the problems that our societies face. No one has the answer to protecting journalists around the world. That's why it's getting harder. But by exchanging views, by telling and sharing our own truths, we are more likely to find ways of solving the problems together. Right, you hear enough from me, you don't want to hear any more from the British ambassador, and I don't blame you at all. Our first speaker is an extraordinarily experienced Swiss Kosovar journalist, Mr. Enver Robelli. He has worked for a range of newspapers and is now Foreign Affairs editor of, and I'm going to read it out because if I don't, I'll get it wrong.
Vetëm të lexoj
Well,
se kur ka
pronounce it
lexuar,
wrong, not pronounce it.
të lexoj gabim.
I've lost the piece of paper.
Edhe
This is,
më-
always get yourself ready before you step into in front of a camera. This is why you don't let diplomats and civil servants be journalists. Sorry, Enver. Tagesanzeiger, of course, as well as writing for Koordinator and the online portal Dialogue Plus, which I'm sure many of you here read as avidly as I do. So, Enver, thank you very much for joining us. Over to you.
Faleminderit shumë për ftesën, zoti ambasador. Unë si shtetas zvicran duhet t'ju bëj dy falënderime. E para për punën dhe angazhimin tuaj në mbrojtjen e gazetarëve, është një punë jashtëzakonisht e vlefshme që e bëni. Në të kaluarën kemi parë ambasador nga shtetet të tjera, të cilët për fat keq nuk na kanë bajt anën, po më shumë i kanë mbështetur politikanët e papërgjegjshëm. Pastaj dua t'ju falenderoj për dy gjëra, të cilat mua personalisht më kanë ndihmuar shumë që të integrohem në Zvicër. E para, ka qenë një britanik i cili me 14 korrekt 1865 është ngjitur në kodrën mitike zvicrane në Matterhorn, të cilin e shehni në çdo çokoladë zvicrane. Pa britanikët nuk do ta kishim zbuluar turizmin alpin dhe Zvicra nuk do të ishte ajo që është sot. Dhe falëndrimi i dytë është që britanikët e kanë zbuluar hekurudhën dhe duke zbuluar hekurudhën pa dashur e kanë zbuluar kombin zvicran. Sepse Zvicra nuk ka fe të përbashkët, janë disa kombe të ndryshme dhe këto kombe, këto etni i ka bashkuar hekurudha. Njerëzit kështu janë njohur me njëri tjetrin nga shekulli 19 e tutje dhe kështu është themeluar Zvicra moderne. Ne që jetojmë në dy kultura të ndryshme jemi vazhdimisht të prirur të bëjmë krahasime, si është këtu, si është atje. Nga njëherë njerëzit këtu na keq kuptojnë, edhe mua më keq kuptojnë se mendojnë që ndoshta po t'inglloj arrogant, që po them ne kështu i bëjmë gjërat në Zvicër, po tani edhe është fillon kjo faza e pushimeve verore dhe Kosova vërshohet edhe me një shtresë të caktuar të njerëzve nga Zvicra dhe Gjermania. Por ne vërtet duhet bëjmë krahasime, sepse unë nuk mund ta krahasoj Kosovën me vende ku nuk ka demokraci, me vende ku nuk sundon ligji, me vende ku vriten gazetarët. Ne duhet të punojmë për idealet mëdha dhe nëse vetëm 10% atyre idealeve realizohen, atëherë do duhet të ishim shumë të lumtur. Por si është situata në Kosovë sa i përket një ideje të përbashkët. Për fat keq, po na mungon një ide e përbashkët, po na mungon një vullnet i përbashkët për të tubuar rreth idesë për ta bërë Kosovën shtet funksional, shoqëri funksionale, një vend ku sundon ligji. Për fat keq, nuk kem problem vetëm me politikanë, kem problem edhe me struktura të caktuara të gazetarëve, të cilët faktikisht më shumë zhvillojnë betejë kundër kolegëve të tyre se sa që kryejnë profesionin e tyre. Pastaj unë ndaj pjesë të madhe të gazetarëve në 3 kategori. Është ajo kategoria çesharakëve që thonë mund të bëjmë gazetarë se shkojnë punë pa urrë dhe pa kravatë. Kategoria e dytë janë ata që janë pasuruar në mënyrë marramendse dhe e kanë poshtruar këtë profesion dhe faktikisht na kanë dëmtuar shumë neve që jemi përpjekur në kushte të rënda, të vështira, të ruajmë dinjitetin, të mos përlyhemi në një sistem i cili me vite tenton të blej, e kur nuk arrin të blej, pastaj fillon të thurë legjenda në për kafet Prishtinës, jo ka dash këtë, jo ka dash atë. Por në detajet, në gjërat e tilla, domethënë duhet ju qëndrojmë stoik dhe të mos dorëzohemi, sepse mendoj se një ndër punët më fisnike, më të mira dhe shërbimet më të mira që mund t'ja bëjmë kësaj shoqërie është të përpiqemi t'ja themi të vërtetën. E vërteta i ka shumë nuanca dhe askush nuk e ka licencën e së vërtetës. Unë me kapacitetin tim, me mundësitë e mia, po përpiqem që sa vite të them diçka nga ajo që më mundon, më bren, më shqetëson dhe kur bëj krahasime, atëherë unë në rastin konkret do doja për shembull të krahasoja se si urrëzua qeveria në Austri për 18 orë urrëzua nën kryeministri, i cili pasi kishte pirë disa Red Bulla në një ishull spanjoll, një gruaje që nuk e njehte deshi ose i premtoi se do t'ia shes gjysmën e Austrisë, përfshirë dhe mediat. Dhe fuqia e mediave ndikoi që jo vetëm ai të largohet, por të bie gjithë qeveria, të kemi një president i cili në fund të ditës del edhe thot falenderit gazetar për punën e jashtëzakonshme që keni bërë. Ka pasur debate të ndryshme, a ka qenë e lejuar që të bëhen incizime të tilla media të publikojnë, por në këtu ne duhet të udhëhiqemi vetëm nga një parim. A është në interes të publikut? Dhe unë mendoj se është shumë në interes të publikut. Janë mbi 6 orë incizime në të politikanëve austriak. Dhe asgjë që është private nuk është publikuar, por çka është publik, çka është në interes publik, është publikuar dhe duhet publikohet. Dhe kështu duhet të veprohet pamëshirshëm edhe këtu, sepse bëhet fjalë për parat tuaja, për kontributet tona, për këtë shoqëri, për të ardhmen tonë, për të mirën tonë të përbashkët. Dhe nëse ky trend vazhdon edhe me tutje, kjo papërgjegjësi, ne do të bartim pasoja shumë të mëdha. Dhe këto pasoja dorën zemër i kemi paguar. Nuk kem liberalizim të vizave. Mund të akuzojmë Unionin Evropian për shumë padrejtësi ndaj Kosovës, por a kemi qenë kaq të zemëruar edhe ndaj politikanëve tanë kur e manipulonin tenderin për pasaporta? Do me thënë, nuk besoj që kemi qenë. A kemi qenë të zemëruar kur politikanët tanë vetëm edhe këtu në sheshin Skënderbej nuk kanë hapur gurthys? A kemi qenë kaq të zemëruar dhe a jemi ende të zemëruar që na nuk e dim sa kanë kushtuar projektet më të mëdha infrastrukturore të Kosovës? Kosova ka një buxhet sa një firmë mesatare zvitrane. Dhe prej atij buxheti gati gjysma shkon për autostrada pa të dhëna konkrete, pa i parë njerëzit, kontratat, si janë harxhuar ato të holla, por ne marrim vesh, për shembull, që kamionët e Zvonko Veselinowicit që bllokojnë urën në Mitrovic, të njëjtit përdoren për të ndërtuar autostradën patriotike. Do me thënë, patriotizmi për shtresat e caktuara të politikanëve është vetëm një maskë. Dhe unë mendoj që lufta jonë duhet të fokusohet në këtë drejtim, sepse mendoj se pa gazetarit pavarur nuk ka demokraci, pa demokraci nuk ka liri. Nëse vdes gazetaria, ka për të vdekje dhe shoqëria e hapur. Nëse vdes fjala e lirë dhe gara e argumenteve më të mira, atëherë do të mbretroj vetëm zhurma. Gazetaria e lirë ka qenë kërkesa e parë e revolucionit liberal. Dhe të parën gjë që e ka ndaluar diktaturat ka qenë pikërisht gazetaria e lirë. Gazetaria është fëmijë i iluminizmit. Detyra e saj është të kritikojë pushtetin. Kush merret me gazetari, ai merr përgjegjësi për publikun. Në demokraci vlen ajo që vlen në çdo sferë të jetës. Njerëzve u duhen informata serioze për të marrë vendime serioze. Nëse s'ka informata serioze, as vendimet nuk do t'jenë serioze. Tani, sa janë stabile këto shtylla të gazetarisë në shoqërinë kosovare? Për fat keq nuk janë shumë stabile. Ka shumë mëri e urrejtje mes gazetarëve, secili e kemi nga një dritare në vete, nuk mund ta kalojmë njëri egon ton për të bashkëpunuar me njëri tjetrin. Shumë prej gazetarëve që janë vënë në shërbim të strukturave të caktuara politike apo të krimit të organizuar, po e përsëris harxojnë shumë kohë për të shkatërruar gazetarin, për t'i bërë gazetarët e pavarur të duken sikur ata, dhe ky është një rrezik jashtëzakonisht i madh. Një problem tjetër që unë po e shoh, jo vetëm këtu, po në përgjithësi, është kriza e mediave çdo kund. Kriza e mediave do me thënë që njerëzit po edukohen jashtëzakonisht keq. Dhe po ju pyes edhe juve këtu në sallë, sa prej jush paguani për informacion? Besoj që është pakica ose asnjë. Dhe ky është një problem jashtëzakonisht i madh, nuk është problem vetëm në Kosovë, është në Britaninë e Madhe, në Gjermani, në Zvicër, në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës. Në rastet e tilla, natyrisht që lulëzon industria e lajmeve të rrajshme, e lajmeve të cilat e dezorientojnë shoqërinë, e shndrojnë në një mulli të zhurmës, pa vizion për të ardhmen, dhe pasojat po i shohim. Faktikisht, shumica e gazetarëve edhe këtu jetojnë në këtë fluskën e Prishtinës, e spjegojnë botën me 2-3 shënime në Facebook, mund të kyçen në për kafet Prishtinës në internet, gjithçka është fal, një macchiato e vogël kushton €1, por ne po kem shumë pak informacion se çfarë po ndodh në provincë. Ne dim që ndodh në Mitrovicë vetëm kur të ketë trazira. Ne dim që ka ndodh në Dragash vetëm kur rrshet ndonjë ortek i Borës. Ne mësojmë për emrat të fshatrave të Prizrenit vetëm kur shfaqet ndonjë ari. Ne do duhet të dinim më shumë për një mësuese serbe në Kamenit që ka studiuar në Tiranë gjuhë shqipe dhe vjen t'u mësoj shqipen zyrtarëve të komunës së Kamenicës, që është shembull i jashtëzakonshëm. Ne do duhej të kem shumë më tepër këso shembuj nga ato treva të Kosovës që janë sa më larg Prishtinës, sepse edhe atje jetohet, edhe atje njerëzit përpiqen të bëjnë diçka, që të ketë shembuj të mirë nga çdo anë e Kosovës, në mënyrë që të rritet shpresa pak në këtë shoqëri, sepse jemi lodhur të gjithë nga ky teatr i tmerrshëm politik, nga kjo papërgjegjësi kolosale, nga gjuha e zbrazët e politikanëve, nga nepotizmi, nga harxhimi i parave, që t'ju them të drejtën, unë nga njëherë nuk mund, është për te çdo imagjinate, nuk mund ta kuptosh, domethënë se si njerëzit vinë në të shtetet më të varfra në Evropë dhe njerëzit vinë dhe kalojnë pushime në për hotele që kushton suita deri €25.000. Dhe këtu njerëzit bëjnë plane cili spitali i Shkupit është më i miri, sepse nuk i beson kush as ministrit dhe as mjekut, sepse papërgjegjësia gati 20 vjeçare na ka sjell deri këtu. Kur i dhem zemra njërit nga këtyre politikanëve, mos u bëni merak. Pas dite vjen aeroplani prej Zyriut, e merr dhe e dërgon në Zyrih. Por ku do të shkoni ju nëse keni probleme me zemër? Ku do të shkoni ju? Do të shkoni me siguri në Shkup, atje do të gjeni ndonjë mjek Maqedonas, do të rropateni me javë të tëra në autostradën e re dhe të bukur dhe fantastike, e cila është ndërtuar mbi shtratin e lumit dhe sipas çdo njeriu të interesuar pak për ambientin, më duket paksa e çuditshme, por sidoqoftë këto janë, domethënë, rrethonat. Kur i shohim gjithë këto rrethona, a duhet të dorëzohemi? Unë e kam zhvilluar një betejë shumë të gjatë dhe e kam zhvilluar me vetdije. Kam qenë shumë i vetëdijshëm çfarë po bëj dhe ka qenë edhe një betim që ja kam dhënë vetit. Nuk i dorëzohem as një politikani dhe as një oferte që mund të më vijë dhe që ka ardhur. Kjo natyrisht që do me thënë që të paguhen edhe një çmim. Të të godasin në mënyra të ndryshme, merren me shpifje. Por e kam shumë të qartë, jam shumë në paqe me vetveten dhe kjo më jep shumë guxim që të mbështes edhe mjaft kolegë të ri e të talentuar që janë këtu, të cilët kanë rrezikuar shumë më tepër se unë, të cilët në mbrëmje i kanë dëgjuar njerëzit duke thënë mos dilni natën se nata nuk ka ispat. Më duhet të kujtoj se ndër njerëzit e parë që janë vrarë në këtë vend mas luftës kanë qenë gazetarët. Nuk i ka vrarë shteti të cilin e përzuri NATO nga këtu. I kanë vrarë dreqërit tanë, si që thoshte Ibrahim Rugova në një intervistë në Der Spiegel në prill të vitit 2000. Dhe tash, e 20 vjet, ne duhet të ruhemi nga dreqërit tanë. Mjaft e mbajtëm grushtin të forcuar në gjep. Unë mendoj se duhet rezistencë civile për të ndryshuar këtë vend, sepse ne të gjithë kem pas ëndra të mëdha dhe ato ëndra po na mbesin ëndra nëse vazhdon kështu. Dhe unë nuk dua që këto të mbesin ëndra, dua që të bëhen realitet. Si që kanë bërë realitet suksesin jashtëzakonisht shumë shqiptarë në Perëndim dhe të cilët për çdo ditë na bëjnë krenar në fushën e muzikës, në sport, edhe në matematikë, edhe në kimi, edhe në banka, edhe në biologji, edhe në shumë sfera të tjera. Nuk me që një pjesë të vitit e kaloj këtu, po një pjesën më të madhe e kaloj ose në vende tjera të Ballkanit ose në Zyrich. Po flas këtu edhe si njeri edhe i diasporës. Diaspora është më shumë se numër, është më shumë se end social që i përkrah fshatrat e Kosovës. Por për të shfrytzuar gjithat potencial të njerëzve, këtu duhet kemi s'pari politikanë të cilët janë të aftë t'i ofrojnë njerëzit. Më kujtohen politikanë ballkanik të cilët, kur e kanë marrë pushtetin, kanë shkuar në Gjenevë, në Londër, në Madrid dhe i kanë lutur përfaqësuesit njerëz të diasporës, sa kohë ju mund të sakrifikoni për vendin tuaj me një rrogë që është mesatare. Dhe ata kanë thënë 2 vite, 3 vite, 1 vit. Kjo është mjaft për të sjellë një përvojë të re. Mendoj se na presin betejë e detyra jashtëzakonisht të mëdha që ta kthejmë atë krenari që e kishim në vitin 99, atëherë kur për Kosovën fliste Jürgen Habermas, fliste Salman Rushdie, vinte Timothy Garton Ash këtu. E plot figura globale të cilat sot nuk kanë ndonjë interes të madh për Kosovën. Për fat keq me fajin tonë, sepse nuk dham shumë shembuj të mirë dhe kjo na solli këtu ku jemi. Por nuk dua ta mbyll me tone pesimiste, sepse unë shpesh dal ngjitem në përkodrat e Zvicrës dhe më bjen në sy që shoh vazhdimisht vetëm kryesisht njerëz të moshuar. Kur udhëtoj me vetur nga përmes Serbisë dhe futem në Kosovë, nga Nishi deri në kufim e Kosovën mund të shihni 10-20 njerëz në rrugë, që të gjithë të moshuar. Dhe kur futeni në Kosovë, e keni përshtypjen që këtu po vlon nga njerëzit. Ky është shans i madh me gjithë ta njerëz të ri, por këtyre njerëzve duhet të krijohet një perspektivë. Delni, votoni, merrni pjesë në zgjedhje, përkrahni partitë të cilat nuk kanë qenë deri tani në pushtet. Janë disa, nuk është vetëm një apo dy. Përkrahni alternativat e reja politike, sepse po vazhdoj kështu ne edhe 10 vjet do t'i dëgjojmë këta politikanë duke folur për problemet me Serbinë. Vërtet, Kosova i ka disa probleme të hapura me Serbinë, por kjo nuk është kurfar arsjetimi për të neglizhuar punët që na presin këtu. Në këtë betejë detyra e gazetarëve është jashtëzakonisht e rëndësishme dhe unë dhe shumë kolegë të mi besoj që do të vazhdojmë të punojmë. Suksesi kur nuk është i garantuar, por mendoj që shpesh kam pas përjetimeve këtu më kanë detyruar, kanë shtyrë që të mos e praktis gazetarin gjuhën shqipe, kudo ku kam shkuar, me kanë dalur njerëzit të më kanë thënë mos u dorëzo për shkak se po e thua një pjesë të vërtetës. E vërteta e plot e dini ju vetë dhe në fund të fundit, ky është vendi juaj, ju nuk keni atë dhe rezervë, ky është shteti juaj, si e ndërtoni, ashtu do të ndiheni. Falenderit për vëmendjen, gjithë të mirat.
Enver, thank you very much. I think, from your experience over all of that period, from the conflict all the way through, and seeing the immediate threat to journalists, and that sense of how important journalism as a practice is for a free society, is a vitally important thing to remember 20 years after the conflict. And I think the role that journalists played in the conflict, bringing information to the world, and then shaping the society afterwards is overlooked. And the risks that they took are underplayed. We have 10 minutes for questions from the audience and from our viewers on Facebook. So I'm just going to see if there are any. I think it's a gentleman at the front here, please. We'll take a few questions just very quickly, if we might.
Ndoshta kreta e çfarë Enveri foli besoj që mund të marrë një titull kakofoni e medjave ose gazetari kakofonike. Në fakt deri vonë pushtetet, po quajmë pushtetin, qoftë pushteti që është qeveritar ose mafioz ose çfarë të qoftë, kanë luftuar mediat duke kërcënuar, kurse në kohën e fundit është paraqitur një dukuri e re. Pushtetet krijojnë media, krijojnë një shumësi mediash, të cilat janë, se thua fake media, merren me probleme të cilat ndihmojnë me mbulu informacionin, jo me dhënë informacionin, po me mbulu. Me mbulu të vërtetën.
Për pas pyetja, keni pyetjen? Sepse di që shumë interesant për du me pas Enverin pak kohën me përgjigj. A keni?
Pasoja...
Desha...
Besoj që po të kuptoj...
Jo, s'mush po kuptu se po na pyetën, po...
Intencën po kuptoj. Pasoja e medjave të papërgjegjshme. Pasoja janë, i kemi parë ditëve të fundit që ndodhi me një person që u prezantua në opinion si hero, me të cilën e sulmonin njerëz të papërgjegjshëm, kriminal, hajdut, të cilët sikur e shijonin atmosferë kur njerëzit i incizonin me telefon mobil dhe ato shpërndashin gjithandej. Kaluan 2-3 javë prej se ka ndodhur kjo, dhe në asnjë medium ne ende nuk e dim cili është identiteti i vërtetë i asaj gruaje, ku është ajo, cili është historia e asaj gruaje, nga vjen, mos ishte edhe ndonjë provokatore e nxitur nga grupe të ndryshme për të shkaktuar trazira, ne, për shembull, trazirat e vitit 2004, ende janë një kapitull I errët, nuk I dim gjitha detajet, cila ka qenë, domethënë, cili ka qenë synimi final I këtyre. Mendoj se kjo që ka ndodhur me këtë gruan, që po thënë thojza Rome, se nuk e di, a është Roma apo jo, e turpron jo vetëm gazetarin, turpron gjithë shoqërinë tonë, për fat keq. Siç na kanë turpruar shumë gjëra që kanë ndodhur këtu pas luftës.
I think we have a question from our Facebook connection.
Yes, we have a question from Leonora in Pristina, and she asks, a ka ma shumë vetë censure apo censure në media në Kosovë? So is there more censorship or self-censorship in the Kosovan media?
Nuk të ta kisha generalizuar, po varet për cilat media. Unë mendoj që në mediat e pavarura, këtu mund të flas në radhë të parë, se unë s'kam përvojë me media tjera, edhe bile kam thënë që shpresoj që koaditorët mos mbyllet kurrë, natyrisht, po nëse ndonjëherë ndalet koaditore, unë nuk besoj që shkruajnë për ndonjë medium këtu. Unë nuk kam pas kurrë përvojë të tillë, nuk di, domethënë që njerëzit vetë cenzurojnë, vetë cenzurohen, si të them, po me siguri, ose në rastet më eklatante është sepse mediat të ndryshme që paguhen nga segmentet pushtetit, natyrisht që I ndjekin vetëm temat që dëmtojnë palën tjetër, por nuk shuhen për si të themi, për parapagusin. Kjo është një problem I madh këtu, natyrisht.
All right, next question. I'm looking for people from the crowd. I think there's someone here at the front. My eyesight's not great.
Ju falemnderit. Kisha dashur shpejt një rekapitulim një minutë gjys të një përvojë që kom pas vetë si gazetar I ri mas luftës në Kosovë, e mandej edhe pyetja. Për gazetarët e shitur është fjala, të korruptum. Tregimi I radios Urban FM, këtu shumica e din, fillon me donacione me nërë mas luftës, dhe kishim një rast ku shkum të IRX, që ishin Amerikanë, që ndihmonin mediat e lira, dhe personin e fjallë ishte shqiptar, kosovar atëherë, punon të aty me rrugë, na I kërkoj, tha ju jap 500.000 marka, po 250.000 këtheni. Kjo është eksperienca parë. Edhe plus ta gjysën e radios, 50% du ta kemë pronësi. Normalisht ne raportum rastin, erdhen investigues për I Washingtonit, e përjashtun atë nga puna, edhe ai me njerë mas asoj pune, mur punë në një redaksi tjetër. Për 20 vjetë vazhdon është producent aty. Pyetja është me këta gazetar që I njohim, I njeh edhe ti shumicën, s'po dua përmendem, a mund presim ditë më të mirë apo çka?
Tash kjo është
Faleminderit.
pyetje të cilën asun nuk kam ndonjë përgjigje kështu me cila do ta kënaqë auditoriumin, po unë mendoj që si apel njerëzit në atë moment kur kthehen nga mediat e macilësore, masi nuk mund të themi që të gjithë krejta, nuk jemi New York Times, asnjë, edhe mediat e pavarura këtu I kanë problemet e veta, por sa më shumë që njerëzit kthehen nga mediat e pavarura, po përsëris atë që e thash, pa informacion cilësor nuk ka vendime cilësore. Informacionet e rrajshme do të ndikojnë që edhe qeveria të marrë vendime të këqija. Pastaj që të mos ja lëm fajin vetëm gazetarisë, këtu janë zbuluar skandale shumë mëdha, po nuk ka vepruar drejtësia. Nëse në kancelari Austrisë bjen për 8 motor, këta 8 motor qeshin kur zbulohet në skandal, sepse me 8 motorëve shpikin e skandal tjetër, edhe njerëzit fillojnë pastaj hyjnë në këtë dinamikën e mediave sociale dhe vrapojnë prej skandalit në skandal, dhe kjo është diçka që po e mbyt shoqërinë, për fat keq po e mbyt edhe debatin publik, po e helmon çdo përpjekje për të ndryshuar diçka. Por edhe kur po zbulohen skandale, nuk po ka konsekuencë. Thonë, nëse qeveria vendos me ble ndërtesën e një biznismeni për 50 milion euro, të cilën ai ka mujtë me ndërtu për 5 milion. Mediat e raportojnë, e ku është drejtësia këtu? Ku është opozita? Ku është shoqëria civile? Ku janë njerëzit që nuk dalin në rrugë me protestu? Këtu problemet janë të shumanshme, sepse nuk janë të izoluara vetëm te gazetaria, natyrisht gazetaria ka problemet e veta shumë të mëdha. Dhe po e përsëris, derisa publiku, masat janë të interesuara më shumë për titull se sa për përmbajtje. Unë shpesh kam këto përvojë, njerëzit thonë jo, po shkruan gjatë, nuk e lexoj, po titullin mjafton. Falni, po unë nuk mund ta spjegoj asnjë probleme të rreshta.
There are some
Yes,
hands going to the back,
there's-
so we'll take a couple of questions back there, if that's okay.
Përshëndetje. Profesionalizmi, normalisht dhe pavarësia e medjave është shumë e ndërlidhur me financimin, e përmend edhe vetë. Je I njoftuar që në shumë shtete, Maltë, Slovaki, Budapest, Hungari e tjera, po funksionon modeli I abonimit edhe modeli I crowdfunding. Në Ballkan, as ka iniciativë prej medjave, po edhe s'kemi dhona nëse kish funksionuar, po më intereson mendimi yt, sa mendon që një model I tillë kish me funksionu në Kosovë ose në Ballkan. Faleminderit.
We'll just take in one more question back there whilst we can. Yeah, I think behind you. There we go.
Përshëndetje, jam Lule Demolli prej Qendrës Kosovare për Studime Gjinore. Dëshiroj një pyetje, a ka normë gjinore se si prezantohen gratë politikane në media? A ka qenë një luftë e mediave ndaj aktivitetit e jagës për ta zvoglu ose është për gjitha gratë e politikës diçka normative, diçka që nuk pranohet lehtë edhe prej mediave në Kosovë. Faleminderit.
Tashti do të përgjigjem këtë pyetjen për praninë e grave në media. Unë në rastin konkret nuk e kam përcjell, se të them drejtën, këtu 200 portale është e pamundshme me I përcjell të gjitha njoftimet. Në përgjithësi mund të them që si këtu në mënyrë më të ashpër, problem më I theksuar në mënyrë më të ashpër, por për fat keq edhe në vendet perëndimore prania e grave në media nuk është në nivelin e dëshirueshëm. Dhe këto ditë kem pas një fakt, nesër është data 14. Nesër në gjithë Zvicrën ka grevë të grave për praninë e vogël në media, për praninë e vogël në jetën publike, kur në një demokraci kaq të zhvilluar si Zvicra ka këso lëvizjesh, mendoj që edhe këtu ka shumë më tepër nevojë për angazhim që të mos mbetet e injoruar gjysma e shoqërisë. Bile mendoj që këtu gratë janë shumicë për shkak se shumica e njerëzve, kjo bota mashkullore, edhe ka nikur në perëndim për të gjetur punë, domethënë sepse po shkoni sot në fshatrat Kosovës, djemë të ri gjeni vetë në internet të kërku vendet punës në Leipzig, në Munich, të kërku do një kusherit lartë që nuk e ka po që 20 vjetë, më thonë, dhe mendoj që prania e grave në jetën publike është jashtëzakonisht e rëndësishme, por problemi I shoqërive të pakonsoliduara. Po nuk është garanci që për herë edhe gratë sjellin cilësi në politikë, siç e kemi parë me një kryeministër të një vendi të rajonit që tha çka tha. Dhe unë e kam përcjell në Zyrich një zhvillim jashtëzakonisht interesant, një grup I kolegëve të mi kanë organizuar diçka tillë, kanë themeluar një portal dhe 2 vitet e para ka funksionuar mirë, ka qenë jashtëzakonshme ti shohësh njerëzit duke pritur në rend për të shkuar në redaksi për të parapaguar. Është një fenomen jashtëzakonshëm, por nuk mund ta mbajnë vetëm lexuesit, aty kishte edhe 3 personalitete zvicrane të cilët kishin mjaft para dhe të cilët e përkrahën me disa milion franga projektin e ri. Nuk di si do të mbjetoj, si do të funksionoj, por fillimi është jashtëzakonisht interesant Dhe mendoj se do duhej të bëhej një provë edhe në Ballkan. Sa vërtet janë njerëzit të gatshëm të paguajnë për informacion.
Enver, thank you very much. We've already gone quite a lot over time. So in a minute, I'm going to say go and have a comfort break because I know that's very important for people to have 5 minutes fresh air. But I want to say thank you. I found that fascinating. And I often wondered what my pledge would be for defending media freedom. And obviously, I and Dalila think about this a lot. It's perhaps shameful of me to say your challenge was how many people in this room pay for information. And I don't. We don't buy newspapers, and I said I'm not subscribing. So I guess my pledge would be that I will. And thereby support independent, free media. So thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you, audience, for your time.
Mirëmbrëma. Sapo përfundoi prezantimi I një nga mysafirët tanë në Prishtinë për Brit Talks 2019, që I paraprin festimit të ditëlindjes së mbretëreshës Elizabeth, e cila do të mbahet nesër më 14 qershor. Pranë meje është gazetari mirënjohur Enver Robelli. Mirëmbrëma.
Mirëmbrëma, faleminderit.
Dëgjuam një prezantim shumë interesant, mirë po edhe një herë do të donim nga ju të dëgjojmë se cilat janë kërcënimet sipas jush ndaj mediave në Kosovë.
Po ka kërcënime të lloj-llojshme. Pikëparë është presioni I pushtetit ndaj mediave të pavarura duke I përjashtuar tazëm nga shpalljet që I jep qeveria dhe duke favorizuar media të caktuara. Pastaj është presioni nga grupet jo formale, nga njerëz të fuqishëm të cilët mund të kërcënojnë gazetarët, ka ndodhur edhe që I kanë goditur, I kanë rrahur. Pas luftës kemi pasur raste kur edhe kanë përfunduar edhe më keq se rrahje, domethënë I kanë grupet ndryshme I kanë vrarë gazetarët dhe për fat mirë raste të tilla nuk kemi pasur viteve të fundit, por unë nuk do të thoja që gjendja e mediave në Kosovë në sa I përket sigurisë është përmirësuar në mënyrë drastike. Ne ende vazhdojmë të jemi një demokraci e pa konsoliduar, një semi-autokraci dhe në semi-autokraci ka vazhdimisht rreziqe me të cilat ballafaqohen gazetarët.
Në indeksin botror 2019 për lirjen e mediave të shtypura, Kosova e mban vendin në 75, që krahasuar me vitin 2018 është, domethënë, ka lëviz lart në listë. Mendoni se studimet të tilla duan të merren si referencë dhe të na inkurajojnë?
Është një inkurajim, por nuk do ta mbivlerësoja shumë. Problemi është që mediat këtu ballafaqohen me një ambient jashtëzakonisht të vështirë për të mbijetuar. Në radhë të parë, për shkak se shumica e lexuesve janë përshëndetur me idenë se duhet të paguajnë për informacion dhe kështu që bien pre e çdo njoftimi që mund të lansohet nga grupe të ndryshme të interesit dhe kjo pastaj ka pasoja për debatin publik, për helmimin e debateve publike, për shkaktimin nga njerëz të zhurmave të panevojshme për të heshtur problemet e vërteta. Po në përgjithësi problemi që kanë mediat në Kosovë nuk ka të bëjë direkt me to. Problemi është që edhe kur raportojnë mediat, hapi I ardhshëm do duhet ishte që të vepronin autoritetet e drejtësisë. Thonë, aty ku një gazetare ka publikuar lajmin, ka zbuluar një skandal, aty mbaron puna e tij. Më shumë ne nuk mund të kërkojmë nga një gazetar. Pastaj është detyrë e institucioneve të rendit që të veprojnë. Në të shumtën e rasteve, institucionet e rendit nuk veprojnë, ose kur veprojnë, I prolongojnë rastet, kur janë personalitetet të fuqishme ose persona të fuqishëm pas një periudhe të gjatë të gjykimeve, të anulimit të gjykimeve, njerëzit shpallën të pafajshëm, ka raste kur gjykatësit u kërkojnë falje të dënuar, thonë me falni që sepse kështu po thot ligji, sepse po të pyetësha, unë nuk do të dënoja dhe domethënë është një problem i gjerë shoqëror, nuk është vetëm problemi i mediave.
Gazetaria e fortë, gazetaria e mirë i sfidon politikanët, i sfidon qeveritarët. Ju, si gazetar, do të thotë cilat janë disa nga përvojat tuaja ku ju i keni sfiduar me pyetjet më të vështira?
Po ka pasur raste ndryshme edhe pse unë nuk preferoj shpesh të bëj intervista me politikanë, sepse në të shumta e rasteve nuk thonë diçka substanciale, por ka pasur raste kur jam përpjekur të zhvilloj intervista kontroverse që njerëzit ose politikanët ta ndihen vetën ndoshta pak një situatë të pakëndshme ose të ndërpresin intervistën dhe pastaj pas 2-3 ore të lajmërohen prapë dhe të thonë që nuk reagova mira, mund të bëjmë sërish intervistën, por në përgjithësi unë nuk preferoj shumë të zhvilloj intervista me politikanë, jo vetëm këtu, por edhe në vende tjera prej të cilave raportoj, për shkak se sinqerisht nuk thonë gjëra të mëdha dhe mund të them që jeta është, si për gazetarin, shumë e interesante kur flisni me njerëz në shesh, kur shkoni dhe rrini 5 ditë në Krushë të Madhe dhe çdo ditë e kaloni në kafeterinë Mulliri dhe flisni me qytetarë të zakonshëm, me njerëz që punojnë tokën, me njerëz që përpiqen të mbijetojnë, me automekanik dhe aty unë e ndjej jetën e njerëzve të Kosovës dhe kjo natyrisht më ka inspiruar shpesh, domethënë edhe për të shkruar tekste më të gjata, për të prezantuar jetën e njerëzve, edhe për të zbuluar, edhe për të parë, përjetuar momente të vështira, ta zëm të grave, të dënuara gjatë luftës, të cilat për një moment, pas një heshtje 20 vjeçare fillojnë të rrëfejnë, të tregojnë të merren në për të cilin kanë kaluar. Dhe mendoj që kjo është qasja më e mirë ndoshta për gazetar. Sa i përket, se ndoshta mund t'ju interesojë edhe kjo nëse kam pasur ndonjë kërcënim, do të mund të thoja ose të heroizoja veten ose të martirizoja veten, nuk e them që kam pasur kërcënime, jo, nuk kam pasur kërcënime, por ndoshta për shkak se unë ju kam qëndruar në distancë politikanëve, nuk kam pranuar të dalë në dreka dhe darka me ta, që me pak të me paguajnë ata dreka dhe darka. Raporti im me ta ka qenë dhe vazhdon të jetë shumë zyrtar, dhe kjo më duket që e kemi ruajtur njëri tjetrin.
Ju veproni nga Zvicra, çfarë keni përfituar nga kolegët tuaj zvicran dhe a mund të thoni se ata ballafaqohen me sfida të ngjashme?
Sfida kryesore momentalisht është që ne po punojmë për një fush mediale e cila po reduktohet gjithnjë më shumë, lexuesit po kalojnë në botën digjitale dhe nuk janë shumë të interesuar të paguajnë për informacion dhe ky është një problem, domethënë sepse ka vazhdimisht shkurtime të buxhetit në shumë redaksi. Sa i përket përvojës, natyrisht që kam pasur një përvojë të jashtëzakonshme me shumë kolegë, sidomos gjatë kohës kur kam qenë permanent i stacionuar në Zagreb gjatë vitit 2006-2012 dhe në fund 2012 dhe vazhdimisht domethënë kemi udhëtuar bashkë me kolegë zvicran, me kolegë gjerman, francez, kemi ndarë përvoja të përbashkëta, kemi diskutuar për temat e përbashkëta, gjërat e cilat unë, sepse ndoshta unë jam edhe pak një insider i këtyre zhvillimeve në rajon, për shkak se njoh gjuhët e rajonit dhe gjëra që mua nuk më janë dukur shumë interesante, atyre janë dukur shumë interesante dhe më kanë tërhequr edhe mua vëmendjen pastaj, ose gjëra të cilat unë nuk kam treguar që potencialisht do të ishin interesante, ka qenë një përvojë jashtëzakonshme dhe kjo përvojë vazhdon natyrisht. Unë tani domethënë vitin e ardhshëm mbushën 20 vjet që punoj redaktor në gazetën zvicrane Tagesanzeiger, e cila është gazeta më e madhe politike e Zvicrës, aty mbuloj Evropën Juglindore, Turqinë, gjykata ndërkombëtare dhe organizata tjera ndërkombëtare.
Sonte ju datë shumë mesazhe për gazetarët e Kosovës. Në prezantim shpresoj që do ta dëgjojnë shumica, sepse jemi duke transmetuar në Facebook. Edhe kjo do të ishte pyetja ime e fundit. A ju kontaktojnë shumë gazetarët e rinj nga Kosova që të këshillohen ose të paktën të ju thonë se përcjellin punën tuaj dhe e marrin shembull ndonjëherë?
Mbaj mjaft kontakte me gazetarë, sidomos të ri që shoh që janë të talentuar, që kanë një qasje pak më ndryshe, që kanë kujdes në shkrimin e teksteve. Mendoj që një problem shumë i madh është që jo pa gazetarë për fat keq kanë njohuri shumë të kufizuara të gjuhës shqipe, dhe kjo nuk e mbyt edhe kreativitetin në të shprehur. I shohim edhe në shumë debate televizive që janë jashtëzakonisht triviale, të them drejtën, që nganjëherë nuk e di, domethënë, apo i shikon njerëz që po flasin në studio apo janë ndonjë restorant duke diskutuar, por kam edhe aq sa kam pasur mundësi, kam përkrahur, kam ndihmuar disa prej tyre të cilët janë kërcënuar ose janë goditur nga grupe të ndryshme, i kam portretuar në mediat gjermane, zvicerane, kam alarmuar, si them, opinionin ndërkombëtar edhe opinionin ndërkombëtar për problemet me të cilat ballafaqohen. Shpresoj që e vlerësojnë ata, nuk kanë nevojë të jenë mirënjohës, por shpresoj që u kanë ndihmuar që të vazhdojnë punën e tyre të mirë dhe fisnike.
Faleminderit shumë. Shpresoj edhe në vazhdim do të kaloni mirë.
Faleminderit shumë. Faleminderit ju.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second part of Brit Talks 2019. To those in the room and those on Facebook, thank you for following us and sticking with us, and thank you for joining us and being part of an important global campaign. Our next speaker is one of the most experienced, decorated and celebrated war correspondents of his generation. He began reporting for The Times during the war in Bosnia and subsequently covered conflicts in Chechnya, Kosovo, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, Iraq, Libya, and I suspect other places that are left off the list. He's the winner of 10 major press awards, including an Amnesty International Award in 2012 and the 2014 Bayer Calvados Award. And apart from this, he is the author of 2 critically acclaimed books, My War Gone By, I Miss It So, and Another Bloody Love Letter. And I know for a fact that the first of those books is very dear to people even in this room, one of whom told me that it made him cry when he first read it. Anthony has an extraordinary life story, and it is a great honour to have him with us here tonight. Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's a delight for me to be back in Pristina, where I spent so much time in 98 and 99 and 2000 covering that era of Kosovo's history. And indeed, to know for sure that I was here 20 years ago, and in the company of an interpreter I had supper with last night, one of many old friends that I've had the chance to see and catch up with in those tumultuous times. And I remember particularly the friend who I had supper with last night had probably one of the shortest job interviews ever on the steps of the Grand 20 years ago, yesterday I think it was, which went something like, hey, do you speak English? How well do you speak English? Have you got a driver? What do you like with dead people and burning houses? Okay, you're hired. With memories of those days and other wars in mind, I would like to talk to you a little about aspects of freedom of the press through the prism of my experience, which is covering wars. I've been a journalist for the Times of London for 26 years, and as the ambassador said, I started reporting for the Times in Bosnia and have been around many conflicts since then. But in the last 5 years, I think more rather than less, my journalistic work has been involved in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. And I've learned a lot recently about aspects of freedom of the press through really how people regard the press, and two very different perspectives, which I've learned from two extremely interesting people who I'll tell you about now. One of the people was a Syrian Islamist rebel who shot me. He shot me 4 years ago. And usually people who get shot in war don't know who shoots them. It's just a bullet that comes out of nowhere, fired by a stranger, someone they never see. But in this case, I know very well who it was who shot me. I knew his name, and I knew him quite well. And so, without going too much into the details of the two bullets he gave me, I want to certainly talk about why I think he shot me, because I think it's quite interesting. The other individual I want to talk about this evening, who I met recently and learned a lot from, and I found extremely interesting, was Shamima Begum, who was a young British woman who ran away from school in London when she was aged just 15 to join Islamic State, and who I found earlier this year when she was 19. So what both these people have got in common is Syria. Now, in most wars that I go to, the first thing I'm aware of is how lucky I am as a Western reporter to be in a war compared to the local reporters. Now, one of the main reasons that I feel that fortune is that ultimately I'm probably not going to be in the war for very long, and I'm going to go home to a fairly well-established and secure democracy where the state is not going to come knocking around at my door at night threatening me or my family. That is very much in contrast to the local journalists who I see working in areas of conflict. And I'm very cognizant of that. Syria was rather different because the threat was extreme for everybody, not just local journalists who suffered egregiously, but also for Westerners who were interpreted in a particular way by every side and were seen as a particularly desirable focus to target. And the crux, though, of what I want to speak about in Syria through these two people is how concepts of journalists can change amongst local actors on the ground. So first up, let's start with the guy who shot me. Marita, can you put the first photograph up, please? The photograph of the room. Okay, can we turn the lighting down there just a little bit so we can see the photograph better? Okay, now this doesn't look like a room much where someone's about to get shot, but just to take you through the right to left, on the far right we have a friend of mine who's a photographer for the Times called Jack Hill. Then there's me looking slightly dreamy in the middle, and the interesting guy on the left is called Hakim. He went by several other names, but basically his name is Hakim. He's a rebel commander in his sort of mid to late 20s, and with two of his children. And keep that photograph up for a minute. This was taken in May 2014. Keem's the guy who ends up shooting me. But just let me tell you a bit about him, because he's quite an interesting guy. So, very typical of the kind of commander that you end up working with as a journalist in war. He's low, mid-level commander, cunning enough to know how to stay alive, smart enough to command a small group of people, maybe 20, 25 people. An Islamist, but not Islamic State. His family was divided absolutely typically along lines similar to that of many Syrian families. They all fight against Assad. One of his brothers, who was later killed, was a member of Jabhat al-Nusra, al-Qaeda group, and he had another elder brother who later joined Islamic State. Now, sometimes Hakim's group would fight against Islamic State, and sometimes not. Sometimes there'd be an uneasy truce. Now, how did he regard us? I mean, I met him many, many times in many different assignments from 2012 on. And we had a sort of loose common ground in that, which you need in a war, in that if you're working with local commanders, this is different to civilians, you hope that generally they're going to be at least benign to the presence of Western journalists there, understanding that loosely, that the Westerner is going to, the importance of having facts reported by a Westerner, where that's possible. And from my side of it, in the company of commanders like that, you learn a lot about the war and you see an awful lot because you go out with a unit. Now, where rebel commanders had also made their analysis of the benefits of Western journalists, was they looked at Libya, and they saw that in Libya in 2011, in the revolution, Western journalists were sort of an agent for beneficial change for rebels, in that the presence of Western journalists led to an intervention by NATO, which overthrew Gaddafi. And I think Syrian rebels certainly thought the same was likely to happen in the Syrian revolution. So at the start of the revolution, most rebels were sort of okay or even friendly towards Western journalists. But things changed. The nature of the war there, which was much, much more acute than any other of the many conflicts that I've covered, daily airstrikes, daily bombardment, daily massacres, or certainly weekly massacres of civilians. The killing of prisoners was absolutely de rigueur. The amount of deaths was off the scale of anything else I'd seen. Chemical weapons were used on a regular basis. So you get this extreme, protracted violence. And as time goes by, locals, rebels, and civilians realize that the West is not going to intervene. So they start seeing journalists in a different way. They stop seeing journalists as likely beneficial presence to their revolution, and end up seeing them against the backdrop of so much violence and so much death as, in fact, the epitomes of Western cynicism. We would go there, record this extreme suffering, increasingly realizing that nothing was going to happen as a result. And that led to a groundswell of disillusion and anger in Syria towards the West, towards journalists in particular. Some aspects of that anger and disillusionment were obvious. The establishment, it laid a very fertile ground to the establishment of Islamic State. Other aspects were less obvious, which was why in May 2014 I went back to go and stay with Hakim once more after I'd been working for a couple of weeks in Aleppo. Now, at that time, there were already 4 French journalists, 3 Spanish journalists, a Danish photojournalist, 2 American journalists, and a British journalist missing, abducted in Syria, all who've ended up in the hands of Islamic State, but some of whom had not been kidnapped in the first case by Islamic State. They'd been kidnapped by other rebel groups, angry with the Western media, who had then sold them on to Islamic State. However, I had a very good interpreter. I knew the area I was working in quite well, and I hoped that wouldn't happen to me. What I didn't know was that Hakim's calculus of what Western journalists were about, what benefit they might have, had changed. So that when this photograph was taken, I was just having a bit of a siesta. I had some work to do in the town where Hakim lived. We were about to have an amazing supper that night when he called in a lot of his fighters, whom we knew from earlier, and all sat down and ate together, not knowing that he was actually planning to have us kidnapped the next day. I remember at supper, many of the people there I knew, but there were a couple of really serious-looking guys, one with a big scar on his face, who were totally unsmiling and strangers, and they were looking us up really carefully. I learned later that they were the middlemen who were due to sell us on to Islamic State after we'd been kidnapped. The next day, I bid farewell to Hakim, who said goodbye to us as warmly as he'd said hello, and I drove off with the photographer, Jack, and my fixer down the road to Turkey, and very, very quickly, bam, we got it intercepted by a BMW X5, 5-man gun team, ran us off the road, out, smacked around, blindfolded, plastic cuffed, hooded, separated, moved around, and ended up locked up in a darkened garage, cuffed, blindfolded, and whatnot. Now, there follows a very fortunate and very violent escape. The full details are not so much relevant to the point I'm trying to make as to why this all happened, but suffice to say that my Syrian fixer realized that he was going to be the first who was going to be killed if we were sold to Islamic State, because as a Syrian, he had little intrinsic monetary value or political value. And he was a very experienced guy, quite a tough guy, a former rebel, and so he led this very ambitious and sort of quite violent escape, overpowering a guard. He roared off like Jason Bourne on a motorbike and got away. Jack ran out of a door along the street, also like Jason Bourne, but he was unlucky and ran into the kidnap gang pretty quickly and was dragged off and recaptured. I tried a slightly different route and was going along some roofs, also thinking I was a bit like Jason Bourne, until the roofs ended. There was just nowhere to jump to. I was being pursued and I'd been tied up already, so my hands, it was quite difficult to move very fast with tied up hands. And people started shooting me with Kalashnikovs, and then they got me, they beat me. I was dragged out to the street in front of a crowd where that guy, who the previous night had been our host, walked up to me. I was led to him, my hands bound. I couldn't see very well by that point because of the beating, and he shot me twice. And I was dragged off and beaten for a protracted period. Now, just as one man's perspective, or a group perspective, had sort of seen me kidnapped, so someone else's perspective of what journalists were about saw me freed. There was another, bigger, badder-ass gang in that town who were in the middle of an arms deal with the Americans for some TOW missiles to fight against Assad. And when they learned through all the hullabaloo, Westerners running around the streets getting chased and shot at and shot and all the rest of it, and realized that Westerners were being taken hostage in their zone, they realized that might have negative consequences on their arms deal with the Americans for TOW missiles. So this bigger, badder gang came up to where I was being held and got hold of me and said, right, we're in charge of you now, we've got you, and we don't want you, so we're going to leave you at the Turkish border. They drove me off and left me in a bit of a mess, but free at the Turkish border. Now, the conclusion from that is that journalists are seen in a war as some sort of value to people. And the relationship you have as a journalist with armed groups is always stressed and it's always changing. As a journalist, you're there as best you can to report facts. The armed groups you work alongside or work with, and I'd include the British Army with that, might have an understanding of the benefit of reporting on facts, but they'll also be weighing up that they want to win a war or advantage a situation, and they will compromise very quickly their hopes for the reporting of facts as they need to. The postscript of the story with Hakim came 4 months later when the hostages who had ended up in the hands of Islamic State, the French, the Spanish, and the Dane, their governments all secured their release. The Americans and the British had no coherent means to try and secure their hostages released, and all their hostages were beheaded, with the exception of one British journalist, John Cantley, who's still missing. That wasn't the final conclusion, though. The final conclusion came a couple of years later with Hakim, when one of his enemies, he has many enemies, and they're all my friends, sent me a video, recent video of Hakim. He'd changed his name, changed his guise. He'd gone through a weird and inefficient, I guess, vetting procedure in southern Turkey that the British and American intelligence officers had involvement with. And he'd ended up in an American-backed unit himself that was receiving American munitions and American funding to fight inside Syria. This is a guy who's involved not only in the kidnap of me and Jack Hill, but also whose men were involved in the kidnap of 2 French journalists who ended up in ISIS hands, who lives quite happily, freely, in the lands of our great NATO ally, Turkey, with certainly some sort of knowledge of British and American officials. Can I have photograph number 2, just before I leave Hakim and his merry men? Hi, Marita. Sorry. Here we go. And that's me not enjoying freedom of the press in hospital in Turkey a couple of days after I was being patched up. But I'm going to leave that sorry tale and move on to a different aspect of people's perspective of journalists. This time, through a very interesting young woman, also met in Syria. Just to recap, can we go on to photograph number 3, please? Yes, here she is, Shamima Begum, photograph taken by me the day I found her. Shamima Begum left home in Bethnal Green in London in 2015 as a 15-year-old schoolgirl. She'd been groomed, she'd been radicalized, she went off to Syria to join Islamic State. At the time, there was a huge surge of public sympathy around her case because she was legally a minor, she was a child, and people wanted her back. She went with 2 school friends, also 15. She disappeared. I found her in February this year in Syria during a battle for the last bit of the Islamic State's caliphate. And I found her. And I interviewed her. I was the first Westerner she'd seen, with the exception of foreign fighters, for 4 years. So the interview was predictably raw. It wasn't contrived. Her mind was still very much an Islamic State. It also showed traits of independent thought, but she dumb-mouthed a lot of the very familiar and revolting vernacular of Islamic State. I don't like the word scoop because I think it's a bit of an arrogant word, but it happened to be a scoop. No one else had that story. It was a very interesting story. And I filed it to the Times, presuming that much of the original sympathy towards this woman when she'd left as a schoolgirl would still be there. My job is always, as I interpret it, to inform society as best I can, in the hope that that generates an intelligent debate, in the hope that will drive a positive policy. And I hope that in this case, Shamima Begum's story, which was emblematic of that and as complex, of the many, many British citizens, men, women and children, who have ended up living in Islamic State, would drive a debate that resulted in a positive policy decision. But in fact, exactly the opposite happened. Britain catalyzed into some spasm of rage over this woman and over the story of my interview with her. Within 4 days of finding her, our Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, had revoked her citizenship, despite the fact she was 9 months pregnant and had lost her last 2 infant children through the disease. The revocation of her citizenship closed any immediate likelihood of a return home. And within 3 weeks, she had given birth to a little baby boy, Jara, a British citizen, who then died in the appalling conditions of the refugee camp in which she lived. This was an instance where exactly the opposite of what I had hoped, expected, and logically thought would happen did happen. I found as well there are a number of very different things that I experienced as a journalist who reports war and goes home. Usually the problems I deal with are people's perspectives in the war zone I'm working in. But suddenly I found that I was dealing with the problems of people's perspective as regards journalists at home. I received a huge amount of hate mail, which wasn't so much an immediate problem or threat to me, but it was interesting reading through a lot of the mail I received that I was dealing with people who seemed to have very little understanding of what the value of journalism was in their own society within the UK. And many more who not only didn't know what the value of journalism in their society and the importance and the role it played, but also saw journalists and journalism as a threat. I'll give you one very typical example. It was one of the better written emails I received. Let me just find it. Oh yes, this was from a Mr. Covey. Dear Mr. Lloyd, I find your support for ISIS terrorists to be simply disgraceful, disgusting, as do many others of us who see you as the problem. People like you, liberal extremists, journalists, are the problem. Your actions make our country less safe. You are the problem. Put your country first. You're acting disgracefully. Be ashamed. It was a very common sentiment. And it's something, of course, people have always had a beef with journalists at various times. But I think what's different now, and this is spreading from both sides of the Atlantic, even in countries where there's a very established, mature democracy, is you're getting an echo chamber of social media, which means the polarity of emotions is much, much more extreme. You're having politicians and institutions using and abusing fake news, most literally as the propagation of lies, but also as a way to discredit journalists. And so a calm, informed debate on the back of journalism becomes more and more difficult. There was no happy ending in this story. She remains in a Syrian camp. It's ironic to me that Kosovo, which has repatriated so many of its citizens from Syria who joined Islamic State, despite some of the flaws you have in your follow-on program and procedures in dealing with them, it's infinitely more sophisticated than Britain's policy as regards our citizens who joined Islamic State, because we haven't really got one. We leave them all kettled up in Syria, along with thousands of similarly minded people, one of the most insecure areas of the world, without any long-term aim. I think you're much more sophisticated in your policies there. What I learned with both these people, though, Hakeem, who shot me, and Shamima, who I met a few years later, was that people's perspective of journalists poses predictable threat, I suppose, as in Hakeem's case. The kidnapping and targeting of journalists, particularly in the Middle East, is much more. But I find the greater threat, the one which bothers me most, is actually the kind of threat that's emerging at home. The shrill echo chamber of social media, concepts such as fake news, a general mistrust of journalism, some of which has been eroded by outside external aspects and features, some of which is as a result of journalistic malpractice too. These are concepts which are very hard to correct, very hard to defend against. There's a lot in our society which is great and good, and a lot of people do still respect the power of journalism, but it is increasingly a much more febrile, aggressive, and angry environment to work in, even at home as a war correspondent. I'd like to thank very much His Excellency Rory O'Connell for inviting me and a leader to be here tonight. It gives me great delight to be here, and I'll gladly take any questions in the time we have.
Anthony, thank you. That was a stark laying out of the threats, a challenge to our own complacency, and a talk that provokes in an important way. So thank you very much. I am sure there will be many questions, so over to the floor.
Hi, I'm Lloyd Dini. My question for you is more of a personal question. From your experiences, was there any moment that you regretted your decision for becoming a journalist? And if not, what inspired you to continue your profession? Thanks.
A lovely question. Sorry, where are you? So I can, right at the back. No, there's been no moment that I regretted being a journalist at all. And in fact, I did, although I wasn't very happy when I was obviously shot and beaten up and all the rest of it, in hindsight, I think it's quite ironic. I spend my life speaking to people who are shot and beaten up, and then I got a bit of chance to experience it firsthand. And so it gives me a bit more rapport with people I interview. And I mean, I didn't want it to happen, but it was an education. And I think you have to be quite stupid if you go to war repeatedly and see everyone else getting hurt and shot or beaten and whatnot and think it's never going to happen to you. I'd aimed off for it as best I could. Psychologically, I thought for some time, well, that might come the day when I get shot or hit by shrapnel. I hope it's not going to be too bad. And when that day comes, then I will recover and continue with my job. So it wasn't something I sought. It was something I could have done without. But it was something I learned from. It was okay. It was manageable.
Përshëndetje, së pari mirë se keni ardhur. Deshta t'ja bëj një pyetje, a keni pasur rast kur ju keni mshefur identitetin tuaj? Në raste të tilla, siç e cekët më herët që keni pasur mundësi të sulmoni nga persona të tilla.
No, I still believe that although there's an increased threat to journalists in many areas of the world, one's best defense as a journalist is always to go in and explain exactly who one is and what one is about. I've had to go in plenty of times where I've walked in at night with a rebel group over the hills or whatever, but I've never gone in describing myself as something I'm not, and I've never gone in disguise. I find that transparency is the best way to operate as a journalist, despite sometimes the risks that involves.
Hi, my name is Fatos Bitici. I work also as a journalist. You covered many conflicts that there was a Western intervention and some others there was no intervention. Based on your experience, do media influence governments or governments use media in foreign policy agenda setting?
That's a really interesting question. We always used to say in Bosnia, which went through war for a long time until there was a decisive military intervention. I mean, for sure, the UN had sort of intervened at the beginning of the war with the supply of humanitarian aid, but it wasn't until right at the end that there was a decisive NATO intervention. We always used to say, ultimately, there's something called the CNN factor, which is going to trip switch America into getting involved. And by that, we meant that there will be a point when the American public, who seem to be the driver there, will become sickened by images of suffering in Bosnia, and that will trigger policy. Now, I still believe that my role is, as I described, to inform society in the hope that it generates debate and drives policy. But as time's gone by, I've seen a lot of instances where if governments are really determined not to get involved, as was the case in Syria, then they will not, despite the fact that their societies might be exposed daily to images of extreme suffering. We all know what's gone on in Syria. We all know how many people, it's over 500,000 people killed in Syria since 2011. The country's never going to be put back together again. No one doubts the suffering there, and yet there's been a very conscious decision not to intervene. Sometimes journalists influence their societies to influence their governments, and sometimes it's the other way around. There's not a consistency to it. It's a relationship rather than a rule.
I think we have some questions from Facebook.
Yes, we do. So we have a question from someone calling himself Skenderbale. He says, with all the fake news, how do you see the future of journalism?
Well, for a start, I think that it's very important at school that kids start being taught how they should go about interpreting news and how they should go about interpreting facts. And I'm sure already that's happening in some schools in the UK. I think it'll happen in more, so that we learn better how to understand what is fact and what is fake. I think as well, people do and will and have to increasingly recognize that to trust good information, you should be prepared to pay for it. And I feel quite unequivocal there. The Times are behind a paywall. They took a lot of criticism for being behind a paywall. I'm telling you, paywalls work. Paywalls are the way ahead. Paywalls fund good journalism. And paywalls cut out a lot of opportunity for people to indulge in fake news because people don't want to buy a fake model. They want something, the real thing. So I think the way ahead is going to be paywalls. It is going to be paying for information. It's not ideal, but it cuts out a lot of the damage caused by fake news, a lot of the opportunity for fake news.
We've got questions at the back over here.
My name is Besa Ljuja, civil society activist. Thank you very much, Mr. Lloyd, for an inspiring story, but it got me worried because when you say that in UK, when we know that is a consolidated and very well democratic country, and we see the risk that they see journalists as a problem, then what is the choice for journalists? What are they going to do? Are they going to be, killed, arrested, extradited, or what? How is the journalist then group trying to defend themselves in this situation when they see you and others as a problem?
Again, that's a great question. First of all, I mean, I don't think the UK should be in any way complacent about this, and it's great that our Foreign Secretary is driving the message of freedom of the press, but in the 2019 rankings of countries, 180 countries for world press freedom, and they were ranked according to threat to journalists, cyber harassment, intimidation, and all the rest of it. The UK was, I think, 40th. So, I mean, we're well above Turkey, coming in at 157. But in terms of our own ranking for free press, we've got a lot of problems. Whether that's government moves to restrict the encryption of apps like WhatsApp, whether it's the requirement of some of our political correspondents to have bodyguards when they go to political conferences because the tone of debate around Brexit has become so violent and hostile, whether it's social media allowing such cyber harassment of journalists. We've got a lot to learn, whether it's our own policy towards how we deal with our hostages who are journalists abroad, or particularly my own shtick is how the UK manages to tolerate an opaqueness of PR companies and consultancies that are based in Britain, laundering the reputation of clients abroad without having to declare who those clients are or what the sums of money involved are. I think all those things have got to be very seriously addressed by the UK. Now, overall, I'm confident that we have a very old, established press. Our society remains a sophisticated society, but I can't say we don't have serious problems at the moment. We've got all sorts of serious problems in the UK. We're not at the peak moment of our common sense and civilization. I don't know what the end result will look like. I remain optimistic, but we've got as much to learn about freedom of the press as many other smaller countries with less developed democracies.
A few more minutes for conversations. Gentleman in the centre, please.
Hello, and I have a question regarding the media coverage. Do you think that the media coverage is in proportion with what people really want to know? I mean, there are quite some headlines which are not really that interesting, but still they take the attention away from the important things that are happening.
Headlines are always difficult. I mean, luckily I don't write the headlines, and sometimes I look at a headline and think, that's really smart, it's going to attract readers in and gives a sense of the story too. And sometimes I look at a headline and think that was just a sort of window garnishing designed to bring people in, which doesn't really match with the detail or the length of a story. It's a difficult thing to get right in journalism. By and large, speaking from the UK side of things, I think, you see some rubbish headlines, you see some good headlines. You've also got to respect the fact that certainly in Britain, as well as serious news, we like some frivolity, we like some humour. It's an imperfect relationship. The headline writers often get it wrong, they often get it right. By and large, I think it's all right.
Hello. I'm a journalist student, and my question for you is, what is the media's role in public opinion from your perspective?
As I touched on earlier, I mean, I think it's a two-way relationship. The media does influence public opinion, but it doesn't not the only thing which influences public opinion. I mean, our political leadership influences public opinion. The public have their own opinions as well. We're in the middle of our Brexit crisis. Well, our media is quite divided in the way it suggests what people should and shouldn't do ahead of the referendum, but at the end of the day, people made up their own minds. So, of course, the media has a role. It's a role I've described and one I believe in to generate debate in a democracy and drive policy. There are other drivers out there too.
Good evening, Mr. Lloyd. Thank you for being with us tonight and for sharing these very interesting and dramatic stories, actually, that you've gone through. And my name is Majlinda Aliu. I'm a journalist in Kosovo. So my question is related to your career. So you decided to become a war correspondent. And actually, this is ranked one of the most dangerous jobs that one can do. What dragged you to decide to become a war correspondent, and how does it feel when you bring out the truth about all those massive crimes that are happening out there, and actually the responsible, let's say the international community, not doing anything about it, because you have covered the war in Syria, you have covered the war in Bosnia and in Kosovo as well. So basically in many of these cases, not that the international community took their responsibility. You already mentioned some of the things, how media and government somehow influence each other, but how does it feel for a journalist who is in a war zone, putting their life in danger with one single reason to bring out the truth, and actually that continues to happen? So how does it make you feel?
I find that's quite easy to answer. The first bit, I was always curious with war. A lot of men in my family, my dad, my grandfathers have been in wars, and so I was always curious to see what it was like. So I went to Bosnia, also interested in journalism, sort of became a journalist there, and then it just so happened that that was what I continued with, partially through choice and partially because my newspaper sort of wanted to keep me in that role. So that's the way it works, and I'm happy with that. The second part of your question is more complex. One hopes, as a journalist, that the result of one's reporting is positive change. But one accepts that that is not always the case. The fallback position always has to be that one's job is to inform society. I'm not an executive myself. That's the job of government. So if government, as in the case of Syria, where President Obama, really made the key choice, having laid down his metaphorical red line, whereby if Assad used chemical weapons, he would face punitive action, overwhelming or decisive, it was implied, from the US. The choice was then made that when Assad did use chemical weapons, America would not respond in a decisive way. That was the sort of key turning point moment, a crossroads moment, if you like, in the war, that decided that Western intervention would not happen, and the door was open instead for Russian intervention, which was going to decide the outcome of the war in a very different way. Of course, at times I felt frustrated by that in Syria, but also my job was not to execute an outcome itself. It was to inform people. And I fulfilled that part of it. The fact that I didn't necessarily like the outcome was a lesser blow. It was also very difficult in Syria, always, to see whether a Western intervention would have had a really positive effect, bearing in mind some of the disasters in Iraq and Libya.
Anthony, thank you very much. I know it's been an extraordinary honour having you here. It's been very thought-provoking. I think your point about where the UK sits on the Press Freedom Index is well made. There are certain things that work, and there are certain things where we should and can do better. And I think the point about this is the world is changing, and there are new threats to freedom and the ability of journalists and the media to do its job, and we have not responded as a global society. And I don't think we have all the answers, and I suspect, and I think your example that you used on the nature of how Kosovo is integrating returnees from Syria demonstrates that our societies can learn from each other. This is not a one-way conversation at all. I really want to thank you for coming and sharing these insights. I found it fascinating and challenging, which is exactly the right way to spend an evening. So thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you very, very quickly a few people. First of all, our sponsors for the Queen's Birthday Party and Brit Talks 2019. Amongst them, our diamond sponsors, Shell, Altrade, Elkos and Mineco. I want to thank our speakers tonight, Anthony Lloyd and Enver Robelli, who have challenged all of us. I want to thank my team in the embassy for putting this event together. But most of all, I want to thank everyone who has given up their time to attend this event in person or to follow on Facebook. We have heard some of the existential threats to a free media and how those are existential threats, not just to the journalists carrying out their job, but to our own societies. So I urge you all to make your own pledges on how to defend media freedom. Get online, use the hashtag Defend Media Freedom, make your own pledges, take action, whether it's buying information or something else. Each and every one of us can do that. We now have a little break for those in the room. Sorry, Facebook followers, you can't have the drinks and the Welsh cakes, but please do join us, and thank you all once again for coming to Brit Talks 2019.
Good evening. We have just heard a very dynamic and interesting presentation you had in Brit Talks in Pristina. However, now we will do a short interview for our Facebook Live viewers, and I hope they will be able to hear again the main highlights. My first question is, what do you consider as the most threatening for media freedom in the world and also in Kosovo?
I think generally in the world, the undermining of the concept of truth and the importance of fact within democratic societies, the way that's being attacked over the past decade, but particularly now both sides of the Atlantic, the growing mistrust of the media as it's being undermined not only by governments, by institutions, but also by some elements within social media. That's not a total undermining. I'm sure the media has many of its own residual strengths within democracies, but there is an essential battle over how important truth is in societies, and that's a real threat to the media.
A World Freedom of Press Index shows that in 2019, UK ranks 33. Last year, in 2018, it ranked 40. About 10 years ago, it was ranked 20. Does this tell anything to you, or these kind of studies should not be like something we should look into?
Oh, sure, we should look into them, and I think, in fact, the UK was 40th this year. I think it was at its worst this year, in 2019. I may be wrong. Yes, I think it shows that the UK is the position where it advises other countries on values to do with press freedoms, and it also has quite a lot of issues to clear up itself. There are a number of issues in the UK to do with cyber harassment, government legislation restricting the security of some apps, the encryption possibilities of some apps, a heightened emotion around Brexit, but not all Brexit, that's led to attacks and threats on journalists at home within the UK, and a lot of anger around the role of journalists over some particular stories, which suggests people have lost sight of the importance of free and independent media. These are all issues which the UK has to sort out, as well as encouraging others to sort out.
The same index shows that there have been 11 journalists, at least recorded there, that they are killed in different countries. What do you think? What should the prosecution do more for the journalists who are attacked and killed?
I don't think journalists should ever be killed with impunity. Journalists covering wars, it's inevitable that from time to time some are killed. But where journalists are killed as a deliberate targeting of journalists, it should never be something that can be done with impunity. There should always be international actors who look at the circumstances around the death of any journalist, and where it's possible, they should investigate and prosecute with all the resources at their disposal.
Next month in London, there will be a major conference of freedom of media. Do you expect anything will change while holding this conference?
I doubt anything will change while the conference is being held, but I expect some important issues to be highlighted pertaining not just to the UK, but to the international community as regards the protection of journalists and the protection also of the value of truth and facts in our societies, of its importance and how best we should defend it. So it's not something I think is going to happen immediately, but I think it's very good to air some of the problems which free media is facing at the moment.
What is your favorite story from from the Kosovo.
Well, I tell you what, I can't think of an immediate story which springs to mind, but it's very nice to be back here 20 years ago, 20 years on from being back here at the time when a very positive intervention occurred in Kosovo's history, and see so many friends from that time that are still with me now, accepting that Kosovo has faced many problems since, which haven't been resolved and need to be resolved. But I feel a great connection with the place coming back after so long, and having spent a great part of 2 years of my life here all those years ago.
If I'm correct, in 1999 you published a book called My War Gone By, I Miss It So. A very interesting title. What made you title it like that? I have not read it, but I will after this. I've read that it's a deep psychological book, and I've also read articles which were announcing that there will be a movie by this book, and in which the actor was supposed to be Tom Hardy, but I am not sure if that is a project that is going on or it was just an idea.
So I had the idea, I wrote the book after the Bosnian War, and it was a period where not a lot was going on in my life, and I reflected on some of the odd nostalgia you can get, a sense of meaning during a war. And so that was how the phrase, my war gone by, I miss it so, it referred to a sort of missing for a past dreadful event. And so the title was a play on words that I had. As for the movie, yeah, Tom Hardy did say that he wanted to make a movie version of my book. Let's see, he said that a year and a half ago. It's still being discussed. We'll see whether it happens or not.
It created a lot of surprise in the office when I found this article, and we were very excited. Do you plan to come back with another book or a biography which shows different worlds that you have created since then?
No, I'm not going to write another. There's not going to be a third sort of autobiographical book, that's for sure. I want to write a novel. I've got a couple of good ideas, but I won't be writing another autobiographical book. I'm pleased I wrote My War Gone By. I think I was 29 when I wrote it, and I wrote another bloody love letter probably about 10 years later, but that was the last of it. I think one gets more private as one gets older.
Thank you so much. We hope that you will get to write a good novel. I will not dare to ask you, will it be more about love or war?
Oh, both. You can't have one without the other.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks so much.